We just talked about how under high levels of stress, people cannot generally access the skills or information stored in the brain unless it's stored in procedural memory. But this isn't the only way that stress and emotions can affect us or the people that we mentor or teach. These factors also have a lot of effect on the actual learning process. So remember how learning something or retaining it for the long term takes at least 24 hours after you've gotten it successfully into short-term memory? Well, one of the reasons that it takes so long to move that information is that the actual process of learning, I'm talking biologically, requires that the brain make new proteins and physically add structure to the brain cells that are involved. So when we're talking about stuff like making proteins, what we're really talking about are very complex chemical reactions occurring inside the brain. Chemical reactions that are literally the process of learning. So let's circle back here to stress and emotions. From a biological perspective, stress and emotions are actually the result of altered chemical levels inside the brain tissue. Now, if you've ever done any chemistry, you know that different amounts and different types of chemicals can affect how or even if a chemical reaction occurs. So when we add things like stress and emotion into a training environment, we literally change the chemical composition of the brain tissue, which then fundamentally affects the chemical reactions that are occurring that result in learning. Now, we're not going to get into a ton of detail about this in this program, but here are a couple of principles that you should keep in mind. First, and I'm talking for beginning students, you want to keep the stress level as close to zero as you possibly can. Now, there are times when stress in a training environment can be useful, even necessary. However, very early on, keeping people comfortable and reducing stress is usually going to be a better approach. Secondly, the brain chemicals that result in happy emotions are better at improving most types of learning than the brain chemicals that result in negative emotions. So whenever you can, you want to focus on positive reinforcement, like telling a student they do a great job, or focusing on the positive of a learning opportunity when they make mistakes, instead of negative reinforcement such as raising your voice when they do something wrong. The only time negative reinforcement can be appropriate for beginning students, in our opinion, is if it is related specifically to the student violating one of the core principles of firearm safety. So the bottom line is that emotions have a lot to do with how people learn. If you keep the mentoring environment fun and happy, people are not just going to enjoy themselves, they're actually going to learn better too.